Hi, I'm Katrina Vanden Heuvel, editor and publisher of The Nation magazine. Thank you for having me on your feisty program. My point today is we must take back the funding of our elections from the 1%ers and put the 99% in the saddle. I mean, is it any wonder that on any issue progressives care about, affordable health care, reining in the casino economy, or a fair foreclosure process, we're seeing those reforms diluted, gutted, obstructed. We, the people, not the banks and their lobbyists, need to own the Congress, take back the Congress. We need a system in which candidates rely on the 99%ers, not the 1%ers, for their campaign contributions. That's why you should support the Fair Elections Bill, which has 200 backers in the Congress. And in the abiding belief that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, let's work to overturn the Supreme Court's unprecedented assault on our democracy via their Citizens United decision, which made corporations people and accorded corporations the right to spend unlimited amounts of money from their treasuries on electioneering. The good news? A poll taken by ABC News and the Washington Post showed that 80% of Americans across the political spectrum want to overturn this ruling. So go to unitedforthepeople.org, united4thepeople.org, and join the scores of legislators and organizations and millions of people across this country organizing to overturn Citizens United. Your organizing will ensure that we remain a country of the people, by the people, for the people, and not for the corporations. I'm Katrina Vanden Heuvel, and that's my point. And go to thenation.com to read my blog and find out from many others at The Nation about what you can do to take back your country.
All right, well, Professor Levinson, I'm going to start with you since this is your area of expertise and you've got an article coming out in a law review about this soon. So what's the legal basis for the Citizens United decision and the idea that corporations are people?
Well, I'm going to give you a quick answer, but I'm going to bring you back to 1862 to start the answer.
Rock and roll.
And,
I love that year. Good year.
Good year. So Supreme Court decisions are recorded by a Supreme Court reporter. And in that year, a Supreme Court reporter actually wrote in the notes of a decision about Southern Pacific Railroad that corporations shall be considered people.
Can I stop you there for a second? I have heard, and Tom Hartman's a big advocate of this idea, that guy was, first of all, not on the Supreme Court. Right. Second of all, used to work for the railroad companies.
He did.
So, I mean, this is nonsense. Legally, why are we even following this if it's not a real precedent, if the Supreme Court never actually ruled that way?
Well, it became precedent. He sent a letter to the Chief Justice at the time and said, basically, does this look okay? And the Chief Justice wrote back, sure. So after that became the foundation for our corporate personhood jurisprudence. Having said that, Citizens United does, in my opinion, present a sea change in terms of saying, for the First Amendment, when you're talking about spending money in the political marketplace, that speaker-based identity restrictions are not permissible, by which I mean, if a restriction cannot be applied to an individual person, then the court is saying it cannot be applied to a corporation. I think that's erroneous for a number of reasons, one being that just one of the purposes behind the First Amendment is that I should be able to express myself, the so-called self-realization idea. Corporations are, by definition, artificial entities that have no self-realization interests. I think there are a host of issues that we could talk about, but the second part of the Citizens United decision says that spending made independent of candidates cannot corrupt candidates, and that
that's a good one. That's a good one. Like Newt Gingrich when he got the $5 million from Sheldon Adelson, he's like, what? Sheldon Adelson? Who is that? We happen to have an identical position on, for example, unions in Israel, and everything else, but it's just a wild coincidence. Go figure.
So this has given rise to the super PACs, the independent-only expenditure groups. And as a result, they can raise and spend unlimited sums. As a result of an IRS issue, they mostly don't have to disclose donors. And they can really flood the political marketplace with speech. And I think the public is overwhelmingly hearing from them.
Justice Kennedy in that decision said, oh, no, we'll find out who their donors are. Anyway, I'm sure they'll disclose that. Yeah, they're on the verge of disclosing it any minute now. Yeah. Look, there's two different tracks that you can give and hence not disclose in one track. But the whole thing's a sham. They bought our entire system.
Now, I'm not allowed to coordinate with Jessica. But as an American citizen, If Jessica happens to be listening as I speak right now, what I might say is it's amazing the support, because if you look at how our founders viewed corporations, they were so far from seeing them as people. The restrictions on corporations at the beginning of this country were huge. They could only exist for a set period of time. They could only own property that was directly related to what they did as a corporation. They were as far from the definition of a person as anybody could imagine. And yet the people who support this are strict constitutionalists.
That's because they're literally a legal fiction. They are not endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. We are their creator, and we gave them limited rights until the Supreme Court or some railroad clerk or executive comes in and goes, no, they now have all of your rights.
The state can revoke their life anytime it wants. Can't do that with a person.
And
Unless you're in
arguably,
Texas.
they actually have more benefits. They have limited liability, they have perpetual life. So the day that I can live forever, I think, is a day that is appropriate for the Supreme Court to treat people the same as corporations.
Right, they actually have special rights because you can't sue them like you would a person, you can't imprison them like you would a person, plus they get all of your constitutional rights.
But you can't take away their existence if they don't follow the
Well,
rules.
it's helpful to remember why it is that we wound up on this track to begin with. I mean, why did corporate personhood persist to this point? Well, because it insulates people from legal liability, and that helps with business. So there is a reason why we're on this track. But it does seem clear that, the root of the problem here is people complain about all these outside groups who are having this outsized influence on politics. Well, I don't think it's so much that they're outside groups as that they're inside outside groups. That when you look at who's running these super PACs and who's in charge and who's drawing all this money together, it's guys who are playing both sides of the game. It's guys who are Wall Street guys who become government guys who become Wall Street guys, figures like Karl Rove, you've got them in both parties. That's the source of the problem. And as much as we can argue about whether Citizens United was decided rightly or wrongly, if you take away this decision, the money is going to flow to politics in a free society. As far as power is concentrated in Washington, that's what draws the money.
Okay, but so James, I'm curious, since you're a libertarian, right? I mean, what do you think is the right thing? Right? Do you think that we shouldn't have these rules and let the money flow in and it'll sort itself out? Or do you think, hey, you know what, we can reasonably say we don't want you buying our politicians?
Well, I mean, I think that the way to reasonably say that is by actually organizing and mobilizing as citizens and trying to wrest control over the legislative process back through sort of direct
Okay, but that's what we
participation.
did. We said through the legislative process, corporations are not allowed to give money to politicians, and the Supreme Court came in and said, legislative process, we're going to be activist judges.
And
Well,
all
you have to
citizens
contend with
don't
the Supreme
exist
Court. I mean, you do what you can where you can. I think the important point that needs to be made here is, look, there's a world of difference between a candidacy like Gene McCarthy's, where he found his sort of rich friend and said, I want to run for president, and I don't have any money. Can you help me out? And he said, yes. That's good for democracy. What's bad for democracy is when you have this sort of permanent cast of elites who straddle both sides of the game and marshal all these resources in a way that I think, frankly, is just self-discrediting. People know that these super PACs are ridiculous. You got Stephen Colbert on TV making fun of them day in and day out. Everyone knows what the score is. And yeah, they're having an influence, but a lot of this money, frankly, is just being thrown away. Look at this fight between Newt and Mitt. There's a lot of blood on the floor, and what do they have to show for it?
I don't think it's being thrown away at all. I hope they keep doing it.
Well, I mean, look, one of the things that they have to show for it is that Mitt Romney devastated Newt Gingrich with his super PAC ads in Iowa
So was
and
that
knocked him
good?
off the pedestal.
Was
and he
that
went
good
for
or bad? Was that something you can point to Citizens United and say, oh, bad decision, bad Supreme Court?
No, but that isn't the problem, James. It's not that, hey, Mitt and Newt are fighting. It's that somebody like the Hollywood, the media industry, comes in and goes, hey, you know what? I'm going to buy both sides. I'm going to buy the Democrats. I'm going to buy the Republicans. We're going to have bipartisan consensus. Who gives a damn that a bill like Stop Online Piracy Act is way too broad and could shut down the entire internet, could shut down Google? I don't care. All I'm going to do is I'm going to buy these guys and I'm going to get what I want.
But it's
that's
not
not
working.
new.
SOAP is going down.
Well, first of all, it's because the tech guys were like, hey, you know what? We got a lot of money too. And in fact, I think that's part of the reason they did it. Pat Leahy joked around about how it was the Pat Leahy Lobbyist Job Creation Act, right? Because then they said, hey, we're not getting bribed nearly enough by the tech guys. We got to get that industry going. And Rick, you write a lot about healthcare. I mean, you want to talk about this issue, healthcare industry, the pharmaceuticals, et cetera. Nobody buys politicians better than they do. Both sides.
They are by far the masters, and that's kind of it. It is true, they buy both sides, but the difference is, and I liked your Gene McCarthy reference. I wonder how many people watching actually remember Gene McCarthy, but it was good. The difference is the amount of money being spent today to buy both sides, and the perverse impact it has on the system. Look, people may be created equal, but they don't exist equally. And if you give people with the most amount of money the greatest amount of impact over the system, this cannot have a happy ending for anybody.
Well, I think our discussion shows a number of problems. I mean, one, I actually do think it's a problem to be able to say to a wealthy friend, oh, I want to run for president, because someone who's very capable and doesn't have a wealthy friend isn't going to have the same platform. But two, I mean, the super PACs, okay, so even if they do straddle both sides, we're having a discussion about them, and they're overwhelmingly, people are hearing from them. I mean, people are not hearing a in-depth discussion of real ideas. What they're hearing from is these 30-second hit ads that are just flooding the marketplace, and I think, frankly, overloading the discourse.
And the problem with corporations being people, and this will be my last point, is that they have unlimited money. It's one thing when rich people give to a certain candidate, whether it's Jim McCarthy, Newt Gingrich, or whatever. When a corporation comes in, my God, they're going to spend $8 billion in this campaign overall for all the different campaigns, presidential and otherwise. Chamber of Commerce last time around in 2010 came in with over $31 million. It has such an enormous impact. I think until we end corporate personhood and do public financing of elections, they are obviously going to buy all of our politicians because it pays off. It's a great investment to buy a senator. It's one study said that it gave a return of 22,000% when it came to the tax holiday in 2004. So that's why they do it. It's logical. That's why we've got to stop it. I think the way to stop it is Wolf PAC, a PAC that we've created to fight for a constitutional amendment on this issue.